This is how we're getting the new year 2024 started here on Energy Frontiers. I am your show anchor, Justina Okechukwu. On this special edition of Energy Frontiers, we rewind to walk you through some of the key conversations, events, and developments that shaped Africa's energy landscape in 2023. The year 2023 was an eventful one when it comes to the world of energy, as the story moved beyond a singular script to a multi-authored masterpiece, from policymakers to grassroots activists, with each voice uniquely shaping a future powered by innovation, collaboration, and unwavering determination. The world is undergoing a major shift as calls to phase out fossil fuels grow louder and the push for cleaner energy adoption gains momentum. Some developing economies around the world, like Africa, are asking wealthy countries to deliver on billions of dollars in previous climate funding promises, as well as a balanced, equitable, and just transition as the way forward. Here are some highlights.
Over the past year, what is clear is that we have seen populations voice concerns about the costs and actual benefits of net zero targets as policymakers have altered their approach to some of the energy transition pathways. In many countries, we have also seen many renewable projects being delayed or even shelved due to rising costs and supply chain constraints. As policymakers realize that renewables alone cannot save the day, and maybe over-optimistic targets may lead to future energy shortfalls, the pushback on net zero has also been seen in many countries in the developing world that are only now beginning to have their voices heard. The capacities and national circumstances of all countries, including developing ones, must be taken into account to deliver just, inclusive, and realistic transitions. We at OPEC firmly believe that climate action should not come at the cost of global energy security. In fact, we go further. Energy security, accessibility, and sustainability are essential for the world to be able to combat climate change.
Climate change and energy poverty, that are both sides of the same coin. 600 million Africans don't have access to electricity. 900 million have no access to clean cooking technologies, most of them women. We cannot meet our sustainable development goals without addressing these key critical issues. As we have discussions about the transition, we should never forget this is about people. We should never forget the spirit of the coal miner in Mpumalanga, who got up last night, being scared, being worried about people having a discussion about a transition, not knowing what's going to happen to him. We should not forget that coal has played a big role in what we've seen to drive human civilization and to drive where we stand, even as we transition. But we look at a transition that works for every African. This is our chance to make a difference. And we will not stop as the African Energy Chamber to continue driving this issue, even when it's unpleasant to some.
We are in trouble with transmission. In South Africa, we're suffering from something called load shedding. It's not because we don't have enough coal, we don't have enough power stations. We have all that, but we don't have sufficient transmission capacity. We are now beginning to see refining capacity being reduced and prefer imported finished products instead of refining in the continent. Renewables, very important, but the intermittent behavior of renewables require partnering with base load. We should not destroy base load. We must strengthen base load, partner with renewable energy, then we're going to have a reliable supply of energy. And we must remember that 1 in every 2 citizens in the continent have no access to electricity. 600 million people of the African continent do not have access to electricity, which is the actual challenge facing every leader in the continent. And it is also important to remember that if you go north of the continent, their access to electricity is close to universal access. Sub-Saharan Africa, at best, it's around 45%. That is what we must be debating and deal with. One of the things that we must argue against is weaponization of climate change against development.
Electrification is our answer to energy poverty. Let us not forget that one of the pivotal challenges of our economic growth is to combat energy poverty. We will never say that enough. Our commitment to eliminate flaring in my country, in place since 2007, stands as a testament to our resolve in forging a clean LNG sector. Congo will export for the first time LNG. With LNG and more generally with gas will be not only for export, will be also for domestic market, for people, for population, but also as a vital element for our mining industry, our petrochemical sector, and for energizing our special economic zones.
At the COP28 Climate Summit in Dubai, nearly 200 countries for the first time agreed to transition away from fossil fuels. However, the International Energy Agency and other head of organizations raised a different call for the reduction in investment or total phase out of fossil fuels in order to ensure a livable planet for all.
And we delivered world first after world first. A global goal to triple renewable energy and double energy efficiency. Declarations on agriculture, declarations on food, declarations on health. Many more oil and gas companies stepping up for the first time. Stepping up to deliver against very ambitious goals and objectives. And for the first time, to deliver on methane and emissions. And we have language on fossil fuel in our final agreement for the first time ever.
We are going to see, after tens of years, the fossil fuel consumption this decade will peak. Coal, oil, and natural gas.
COP28 will be a moment of truth for the oil and gas industry. it will show whether oil and gas industry will be the partners of the fight against climate change or not. We are, at the IEA, we believe that the clean energy progress will continue with or without oil and gas producers.
The diagnosis is clear. The success of the COP depends on the global stocktake prescribing a credible cure in 3 areas. First, drastically cutting emissions. So the global stocktake must set clear expectations for economy-wide national determined contributions presented by all countries that cover all greenhouse gases and align with 1.5 degree limit. And I urge countries to speed up their net zero timelines to get there as close as possible to 2040 in developed countries and 2050 in emerging economies. We must accelerate a just, equitable transition to renewables. The science is clear. The 1.5 degree limit is only possible if we ultimately stop burning all fossil fuels. Not reduce, not abate, phase out with a clear time frame aligned with 1.5 degrees. So allow me to have a message for fossil fuel company leaders. Your old road is rapidly aging.
We have more for you in the package when Energy Frontiers return. This is Energy Frontiers. In the power sector, several African leaders and stakeholders asked countries to explore various safe and cleaner electrification sources, while calling for decisive actions on how the private sector and international community can engage to mobilize investment for mitigating the global energy crisis. One organization looking to bridge the gap is the African Export-Import Bank, or Afrexim Bank, who announced plans to launch the African Energy Bank in the new year 2024.
The management of the bank are working on the sidelines with the African Producers Petroleum Organization, APO, which is an 18-member state of African producing oil companies, have decided to create another multilateral agency, which is going to be focused on financing the energy requirements of the African and Caribbean people. So we are in the final stages of getting all the approvals. It is going to be an organization set up by treaty, the same way Africa Exim Bank will be. It will have 3 classes of shareholders. The first class of shareholders will be all the African producing countries, national oil companies. Class B and C would be African investors and international investors. The African Energy Bank will now be able to help African producing member states to take advantage of the over 125 billion barrel reserves of oil and gas, oil that we have, and over 75 trillion cubic scf of gas that we have on the continent.
We are on course towards achieving our target of 100% clean energy in 8 years. Additionally, we have set a target to 100% access to clean cooking by 2028. We are reducing taxes, the 8% VAT on gas, cooking gas. Number 2, we are also extending, on the other hand, facilities that will make it possible to reduce our cylinders from about 2,000 shillings to between 300 and 500 shillings. With an installed electricity generation capacity of 3,032 megawatts, Kenya has made significant achievements in electricity access over the past 7 years. It raised connectivity from below 30% in 2013 to over 77% at the moment. This success was driven by a robust policy and regulatory framework that enabled both public and private investments in the power sector to profitably invest in access throughout the country. This is how Kenya became a global leader in renewable energy exploitation and is on track to meet or exceed its Paris Agreement pledge.
Why the notion of a just transition is so important is because when we're talking about transitioning, we forget that a lot of people don't even have sufficient energy. So when we talk about the developing world and my continent, Africa, we're talking the just transition to them is getting enough energy to survive, getting enough energy to live a dignified life. We're starting at a scenario where per capita, the average African with the installed capacity has barely 404 kilowatt hours in sub-Saharan Africa. That is kind of 20 times less than the average American. So the just is really important. For the first time in history, we actually truly have the chance for when people are getting energy, it to be clean, it to be renewables. But you can't forget the fact that a lot of economies, they want to industrialize. There's a lot of things people want to do with energy. So we shouldn't just look at, one side of the world and forget another side. There's nowhere in our climate promises where you can go ahead and hit net zero and leave 1 billion people in energy poverty. It just doesn't happen that way. What does it truly mean? What it means is that energy access and development of industry is at the heart of the energy transition. It can't be the other way around. And there's a cost to this. It goes beyond, I just want to provide energy to my power system. What happens to my transport sector? What happens to clean cooking? What happens to the way I build? What happens to the way youth train? We're asking countries to basically green their entire economy, but we're not giving them any more money. I think we need to just all make a pledge that it can never go back to being the stepchild of electrification. That clean cooking is just as important, if not more important, than electrification.
Sustainable energy is at the heart of every conversation in the year 2023. Now let's bring this into the mix when the show returns. Stay with us. Welcome back to the program, everyone. The year 2023 wasn't just about energy access or power. It was about redefining what it means to be sustainable. Very loud voices were heard in the year demanding not just energy, but energy that leaves the earth a better place for the future generations. Joined by other key stakeholders, the African Development Bank Group have played a vital role in advancing sustainability and adaptation across the continent through various initiatives and programs, while unlocking finance for green infrastructure projects to accelerate Africa's transition to net zero emissions.
The African Development Bank is responding strongly to climate adaptation needs of Africa. We now devote 63% of our total climate finance to adaptation, the highest share among all multilateral development banks globally. The African Development Bank and the Global Center on Adaptation launched the African Adaptation Acceleration Program to mobilize $25 billion for climate adaptation in Africa, the largest climate adaptation program, as you heard for Patrick, in the world. We are doubling down on climate adaptation for least developed countries through the Climate Action Window of the African Development Fund, and many of our funders are here today. We plan to mobilize up to $14 billion for Climate Action Window to support climate adaptation for Africa across 37 low-income countries.
We believe, for example, that the capitalization of the Loss and Damage Fund is critical because it provides essential grant funds post-disaster, and that is absolutely necessary. but the scale of its capitalization will be a concern to all if it is not properly capitalized. And that's why we feel that a mechanism that allows both for capitalizing the loss and damage, but increasing what is available to you with the Resilience Sustainability Trust and what is available to development banks for resilience funding is equally critical. So when you take 200 from oil and gas and you take 70 billion from international shipping, not to be passed on to the consumer, by the way, and when you take equally another 40, 50 billion from international travelers, air travelers, and then you look at what is the most efficient financial transactions tax and dealing with insurance, so that we have a dedicated source of funding, not just for loss and damage, but for the global public goods that have to be financed in order to build resilience.
And that's a summary of the year 2023 on the energy front. This is your Energy Frontiers, and we thank you all for watching. Remember to follow the program on Frontier Africa Reports website, like this video, subscribe to our YouTube, and follow us across all our social media handles as indicated on the screen. I am Justina Okechukwu. I'll see you again, and a warm welcome to the new year 2024.